give you a little quiz tonight. And I want you to figure out the titles of these Christmas songs by their descriptions in a little bit of a different way. Quadruped with crimson proboscis. What Christmas song? Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. 8 p.m. until 6 a.m. without noise. Silent Night. Minuscule hamlet in the Far East. The little town of Bethlehem. Ancient benevolent despot. No? Yes, Good King Wenceslas. Adorn the vestibule. The halls. Exuberance directed to the planet. Joy to the world. Listen, aerial spirits are announcing. No? Yeah, you were almost right. Yeah, hark the herald angels sing. Trio of monarchs. We three kings. Yonder in a hayrack. Away in a manger. Cherubim audited from aloft. Angels we have heard on high. Assemble all ye who believe. O come all ye faithful. Hallowed post twilight. O holy night. Fantasia of a colorless December 25th. I'm dreaming of a white Christmas. Shiny tintilubations. Lubilations. Shiny tintin illumination. Silver bells. Everywhere. Dozen 24-hour Yuletide periods. Yeah, you're close. What's the name of it? Yep, 12 days of Christmas. Befall during the transparent bewitching hour. Befell during the transparent bewitching hour. No. It came upon a midnight clear. Homo sapien of crystallized vapor. Frosty the Snowman. Desire only a pair of incisors on December 25th. Yep, 2 front teeth. I spied my maternal parent osculating. I saw mommy kissing Santa Claus. And perambulating through a December solstice fantasy. Walking through a winter wonderland. So, I thought I'd start with those. A little bit. Those are kind of fun. Well, we are wrapping up our time in Genesis tonight. Even though there's still quite a little bit left, we're kind of wrapping that in. Kurt, go to the next slide here. We're going to talk about the 12 tribes, and not so much their symbols and things, but this is kind of about that. But what I want to do is I want to kind of set the stage for just a moment. So, Kurt, go on to the next slide here. So you can kind of see a little bit of a historical overview just briefly here as we're kind of wrapping this up. And letting you know kind of where the word is taking us after this, for the most part. So as we look at this just a little bit, Genesis 29 has the sons born to the patriarch Jacob, and that is mostly what we're going to talk about tonight. But before the end of Genesis, the Israelites are going to travel to Egypt. As they travel to Egypt, they're going to stay there for 400 years into Egyptian captivity. So this takes place when Joseph is down and the second in command to Pharaoh. And so the Israelites travel down there, Jacob and all of his sons and their wives and family, they all travel down there, and they begin to multiply. And so 400 years later, the 12 tribes are going to follow Moses out of Egypt. Then they're going to go in, they're going to conquer Canaan and divide the land into 12 different parts, which you're kind of seeing over there. We're not going to go into this a whole lot, but that is the land of Canaan there that was to the west of the Jordan River there. And so they're going to conquer that. And in Egypt, the tribes settle in the land of Israel, or they come after escaping slavery in Egypt. The tribes settled in the land of Israel, each given a designated territory to inhabit. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. They're then led by the judges, and then after that they are led by David and Solomon. Then 1 Kings 11, the kingdom is divided into two parts, but it's explicitly described in tribal terms as that is happening there. The 10 tribes are going to form the northern part that they're going to call Israel, and there's 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, that are going to form the southern part, which they're going to call Judah. So the northern tribes, their capital is going to be Samaria. We've kind of talked a little bit about that. And the southern tribes, their capital is going to be Jerusalem. And we're going to talk just a little bit about Melchizedek again tonight. Remember that Melchizedek was the king of Salem, and Salem turned into Jerusalem. Okay? So that's where Jerusalem came from. So the northern tribes had Samaria, the southern tribes had Jerusalem. Remember when Jesus talks to the woman at the well, she talks about, our fathers worshiped here, and she was a Samaritan woman, right? So that's what she was talking about. She was talking about the 10 tribes that settled in the north, and there was conflict between them and the southern tribes. And so that's why it was that she said, our fathers settled in Samaria, and your father settled in Jerusalem. And Jesus says, there's going to come a time that you're neither going to worship God in Samaria or Jerusalem, but you're going to worship him as a whole. And that's kind of where that comes from. Now, 200 years later, the Assyrians conquer the kingdom of Israel, and they take them into exile, which they supposedly never returned from, technically, okay, in the Old Testament. This sparks the legend of what they call the 10 lost tribes, because all of the Israelis now, they trace most of their roots back to either Judah or Benjamin. And the other tribes, they considered them the lost tribes because it was like they just kind of dissolved. And they just went away. Now, we're going to talk more about that. They didn't actually just go away, but there's some little things that are there. Now, 136 years after the Assyrians conquered, then Babylon conquered Judah. This was about 586 BC. And after that, then the Persians conquered the Babylonians. So we had the Assyrians, and then we had the Babylonians, and then we had the Persians. And the Israelites, at that point, are able to return home. This is back when the king sends Nehemiah back to build the wall of Jerusalem again. Remember that? At this time, they become the Jewish people. From about 722 BC until after the Babylonian exile, much of what we know of the Hebrew Bible was composed and edited by the people of Judah at that point. So that was kind of the history of kind of where the Bible was beginning to be translated in that. 2 Kings 17 talks about the people that were deported, but scholars believe that it was not all of the Jews. Some stayed behind, this is in Persia, and were simply under the Assyrian rule, and then under Babylon, and then under Persia. So the 10 lost tribes, it wasn't that they just dissolved and they just disappeared, but there were a lot of them that did not assimilate, and they did not go to the other places that the rest of Israel did. And so they just kind of stayed there, the artisans, the craftsmen, all of that, and there's historical evidence of that. So it's thought that the 10 lost tribes were really not lost, but they simply just assimilated into the culture. They were the artisans, they were the scholars, they were the urban elite given to education and to boost the Assyrian economy. And they ended up in the Assyrian heartland, which is northern Iraq at this time, to this day. Okay? And then the modern Jewish people, they usually trace their roots back to the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, who formed the southern kingdom of Israel. Now that's a little bit of just kind of setting the stage. And the way that we got to all of that is with the 12 tribes coming from Jacob. Now, we are not going to go over all of the 12 tribes because it's just too much, but I want to capitalize on a few of them. As we go, Kurt, go ahead and let's go to the next. And Marge, would you read this for me?
Later they set out from Bethel, and while they were still some distance from Ephrath, Rachel began to give birth, and her labor was difficult. During her severe labor, the midwife said to her, "Do not be afraid, for you are having another son." And with her last breath, for she was dying, she named him Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is, Bethlehem. Jacob set up a pillar on her grave. It marks Rachel's tomb to this day.
Oh, yeah. You're hearing it in Luke, right? Yeah. Yes, which figures right into what I'm going to talk about, because this is the first mention of Bethlehem right here. Genesis 35. Okay? So, I'm sorry, Kurt. Go back to the Bethlehem one. That's okay. Okay, so this is actually where we get Bethlehem from, is Genesis 35 here. This is the first mention of Bethlehem here, and this is where Rachel has died and is buried at this point. Okay? Now, Bethlehem is also where Naomi is from. You know, remember when Ruth goes out and she starts to glean the fields, and Naomi is her mother-in-law? This was Bethlehem. This is where Boaz was from. This is where David is born. And, of course, this is where Jesus is going to be born. So this is the first mention of Bethlehem in the Bible, and it begins to go down through history until we actually have Jesus here. And so it's part of that history and part of that lineage of Bethlehem there. And so the tomb of Rachel is there. Okay, now let's go on to the next one. Now, we kind of know a little bit about the story of Jacob to a certain extent. Remember that he is the one that is going to give birth to the 12 tribes. But the interesting thing of this, and the thing that I kind of found pretty interesting, is out of family dysfunction comes divine providence. Because we know, as already studying these, that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were all pretty messed up in their family. They were not the greatest family guys, right? And so Jacob is like that. Now, Jacob loves Isaac, but he doesn't love him as much as he loves Esau. We were talking about that last time, right? And so we have Jacob, and with Jacob, Isaac loves Esau more than he did Jacob, right? And then Isaac and Rebekah loved loved Jacob more than she did Esau. So we kind of knew that about the dysfunction. We studied that last week, right? So when we come to Jacob, what he's got is, remember that he worked 7 years for his father-in-law Laban, and he wanted to marry Rachel. But what happened? Yeah, Laban switched it on him. He pulled a fast one, because he said, in our custom, it's not customary for the younger daughter to marry before the older daughter, so you have to marry the older daughter first. Then after that, he worked another 7 years for Rachel. Now, it's kind of interesting because, and this is something that's kind of passed over a little bit there, but when he worked the first 7 years, he worked that before marriage. Then he's tricked and he marries Leah, And Laban goes ahead and lets him marry Rachel, but he still has to work another 7 years. Sometimes we think that he had to work 7 years and then he got Leah, and then he had to work another 7 years before he got Rachel. But that wasn't the way that it was if you read it in the text. Okay? But anyway, he still had to work 14 years for Laban, and Laban was kind of a little bit of a scoundrel there. Okay, so coming up on the end of Jacob's life, you remember the story that he wrestles with the angel, right? And Jacob wants the blessing, and so he's wrestling with the angel. The angel actually turns out to be God, could have been Jesus that he was wrestling with at that point. And Jacob says to him, because the angel is there, and he basically says, the sun's coming up and I got to go so that nobody sees me wrestling with you. And Jacob says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And so he does. He blesses him. He says that he's going to be the father of many nations, passed down from Abraham, Isaac, and now to Jacob. And he also changes his name. And what's he changed his name to? Israel. Yep, exactly. So this is where we get Israel from at that point. And he says, I will not let you go until you bless me. And so he does that. That's kind of the way that it is a little bit in yours and my life, and that's the way that it should be sometimes in yours and my life, because what we need to do is God has given us promises, and we need to hold on to those promises until God fulfills those promises. And we can say to God, I want you to fulfill that promise, and I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. I'm not going to let you go until you fulfill that promise to me. And that's okay. And that is a picture of what Jacob went through, and it's what a picture of the things that that we go through. And sometimes we wrestle and we strive for the wrong things, for money or for fame or for position or for a better job or whatever. And the thing is that God wants us to depend on the promises that he gave us and for him to fulfill those things. And so God blessed him, and he changed his name to Israel at that point. Okay, now, as we're looking at this slide, we've got Leah, we've got her servant Zilpah, we've got Rachel, and we've got her servant Bilhah. So Jacob is going to have offspring with all four of these women, okay? Because again, he wasn't necessarily always waiting on God to fulfill the various things that he was promised. But he was going to go ahead, like Abraham and like Isaac, and take things into his own hands. Now, this is where the birth of the 12 tribes come into being here. And so it's coming from Jacob, which is Israel. And so they become the ancestors, and they become the descendants that are going to pass down all of these things here, okay? So what we've got is we've got all of these different tribes. So from Leah, we have Reuben and Simeon and Levi and Judah, Issachar and Zebulun. From Zilpah, we've got Gad and Asher. From Rachel, we've got Joseph and Benjamin. And from Bilhah, we have Dan and Naphtali. Okay? So this is where all the 12 tribes came from. This is where the 12 sons came from. And they all came from a variety of these four women. Okay? So, yeah, wow. So this is kind of where we are. Okay. Now, we're going to talk just briefly about most of these, but then I'm going to capitalize on a couple of them. First of all, Reuben is the firstborn. And when Reuben is born, Leah says, as you read the text, since I am giving Jacob a son, hopefully he will love me now. Because he didn't love Leah. Because he was tricked into marrying her, right? So he has the firstborn son, which is Reuben. And as Reuben is born, he's going to be the firstborn. But then what happens is that Jacob decides to sleep with Bilhah, and with Bilhah, he has some others. But Reuben is the firstborn, Simeon is the son of Leah, Levi is the son of Leah, and Judah. Okay, then they've got Issachar, and then they've got Zebulun. Reuben is the firstborn. However, the problem is that Reuben messes up, and when he's old enough, he sleeps with his father's concubine, Bilhah. Okay, so he forfeits his inheritance because of that. And as you read in the blessing, as Jacob is blessing all of his sons, he tells Reuben, "You forfeited your blessing because you slept with my concubine," basically. Okay. Then you've got Simeon and Levi, and we've got Simeon and Levi here. They would have been the next in line for the inheritance. However, they had some issues because there were some. There were the Edomites that came in, and they abused their sister Diana. Okay, Simeon and Levi take revenge on them, and since we have children present, I'm not going to tell you the details of how they took revenge. You can read it in the text there, and so they take revenge on them, and because of that, because of their going and destroying these people, they forfeited their next in line for the inheritance. Okay? So that's kind of where that comes from. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. Now, we also have Levi. Levi is cursed for the anger and the revenge of Diana, which was, a noble cause to a certain extent, but it didn't fare well with being in line for the next promotion for the inheritance there. However, Levi is where the Levites came from. So Levi's descendants are going to be Moses and Aaron and Miriam. Later on, Samuel, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Ezra, and Malachi. So they all came from Levi. And remember that the Levites, when they came into the land, they were the priests, right? Now they didn't receive the inheritance of the land like the others did, and the reason being is that their inheritance came because they were responsible for worship, and they were responsible for worship in the temple and the sacrifice of the people. So when Moses and the children of Israel went out into the wilderness and they built the tabernacle, the Levites were the ones who worked in the tabernacle at that point, okay? And so they didn't own any land because they were the ministers. I'm sorry, Joel, go ahead.
So someplace, I don't remember where it's at, someplace in Scripture talks about the Levites being designated as the 10% or the tithe.
Yes, and that's how they were supported, because they could not go out and possess the land, so they didn't have any agricultural benefits or any raising cattle benefits or anything like that. And so everyone else had to support them with the 10%, that's true, in that. And so they didn't receive the land or the inheritance, but that's the way that they received their profit and their money and how they lived. Yes, that is correct.
But they were also considered the sacrifice for the rest of the 12 or
Yes, they made sacrifice for all the rest of them.
No, it says in Scripture that they were considered.
Oh, they were considered the sacrifice for the rest of them because they didn't inherit the land. Yes, that's true. Yeah, I do remember seeing that. So that's true. And so that's why it is that they didn't own any land with the Levites there, okay? Let me see. Okay, so Issachar. Now, Issachar was the son of Leah, so we got him there. And he was they were kind of political in their pursuits. And so they settled around kind of the agricultural area there. And when Jacob gives his blessing, he says that Issachar is capable, but he's lazy. And so he's not going to have the same inheritance as some of the rest of them. And so then finally Issachar actually submitted to the Canaanites. And so that was a little bit of his history there. Now Zebulon, which is son of Leah here, is told to live by the sea, and he becomes they become a haven for ships. And it's an interesting side note that one commentary said that when Joshua assigned the allotments of the land of the tribes of Israel, Zebulon received the region of Galilee along with the shores of Lake Tiberias, reaching to the Mediterranean Sea. Zebulon was also an important haven, in another respect, other than just for ships, because after fleeing King Herod, upon returning to Egypt, Joseph and Mary, with their child Jesus, took refuge in Galilee, the land that was allotted unto Zebulun. And so that's kind of how history progresses on with the land that he was given. Now, Dan is, let me see, where is he? Son of Bilpah. So Dan is there, and he's the son of Bilpah. He's told that his tribe will provide justice for the people of Israel. The name Dan means judge, and so some of the people who come out of Dan, does anybody remember another Bible character that was from the tribe of Dan? Samson. Somebody said it. Samson. Samson was actually from the tribe of Dan. Okay? Now, Naphtali over there, he was from Bilpah also, and they were articulate speakers and gifted with literature, and from his tribe would arise the judge Deborah. And so she would kind of come from him. And, okay. Now Gad, who is Zilpah's son, his tribe becomes known as vicious fighters over every foreign army that they battle. This is Jeremiah 49. And Gad is told that he will be attacked by bands of raiders, but he will also attack at their heels. And so it's interesting to note that God has one of the tribes who chose to stay on the east side of the Jordan in Gilead, along with the Reubenites, in Numbers 32 it says that, rather than cross the Jordan and be with the other tribes within the promised land. So Gad and also Reuben stayed on the east side. Okay, Asher. We've got Asher there, who is also a son of Zilpah. Tribe of Asher is later allotted an area that was prosperous and known for its wheat, its olive oil, its milk, and its butter. And they were all delicacies at the time. Okay, so that's a little brief about some of them. Now, sons of Rachel, and we're not going to go heavy into this either because the rest of Genesis talked about Joseph and all, but we know Joseph, we know coat of many colors. He gets the birthright, being the firstborn son of Rachel. So he was the favorite of Jacob, of course. And so then that is passed on down to two of his sons, who are Manasseh and Ephraim. So we hear of those. And they actually kind of had their own tribes. Their land was divided. Manasseh's land was divided into two, and so it was kind of a half tribe of Manasseh one place and another. And he is the one, of course, Joseph is the one who is sold into slavery, but then he goes down and becomes the second in command in Egypt, and he saves his whole family, and he saves the people of Israel, basically, within that, okay? From Ephraim, which is another one of the sons of Joseph, that's where we get Joshua, and we get Samuel, and we get Gideon, and so they have all come from the tribe of Ephraim. Benjamin was the youngest. He was the last one born, and in childbirth, that's where Rachel died. Remember that Benjamin, that as the brothers sold Joseph into slavery, and then they went down to Egypt, and they didn't know who Joseph was, and they took Benjamin with them. Joseph tested him, and he tested the brothers to see if they were still the scoundrels that they were when they sold him, and he wanted to keep Benjamin. in just a moment, we're going to see who it is that kind of rescues Benjamin out of that. But Benjamin was the youngest, and of course Joseph wasn't going to do anything to him because he was the youngest. He was born along with him to Rachel, and all. But out of Benjamin, the notable tribesmen were King Saul, Mordecai, and also Paul, and so they came from the line of Benjamin. Okay, so we'll step back for just a second. Reuben, Simeon, and Levi disqualify themselves from the inheritance. The next one that it falls on is Judah. And I skipped over Judah purposely because I want to talk about Judah here. Talk a little bit about that. Now, Judah is not perfect. He is one that helped to sell Joseph into slavery. But his character changes because when it comes down to it, and they offer and Joseph wants Benjamin to stay in Egypt and hold him ransom, hold him hostage, basically, for the most part. Judah's the one who steps up and says, take me instead of Benjamin, and let Benjamin go back to his father Jacob. And so there was a notable change in character there with Judah. Okay? Go ahead, Kurt, and go to the next slide. Okay, go on. Because some of these slides I took out, and some I left in, and I didn't remember which ones I left in, so that's okay. Go ahead and go to next. Go all the way down to one more. Okay, so we already talked a little bit about that and where they were. Go ahead and go down again. Okay, good. Okay, Marge, would you read this one and then also the next slide, please?
And once more she conceived and gave birth to a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. So she named him Judah. And then Leah stopped having children. Judah is a young lion. My son, you return from the prey. Like a lion he crouches and lies down, like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes and the allegiance of the nations is his. He ties his donkey to the vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He washes his garment in wine, his robe in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth are whiter than milk.
Okay. Go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this in just a moment. It's important to note that Judah was the next one in line for the inheritance. And that was the blessing that Jacob gave to him and said that he was a lion. And you notice that as he was talking there, that he was talking and he mentions until Shiloh comes. And when we're talking about Shiloh, we're talking about the Messiah. We're talking about Jesus at that point. Now, the lineage of Jesus comes, of course, from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, from Jacob to Judah. Then as you read it in Matthew 1, it skips, we'll skip over a few of the people, but it goes down through Boaz and Ruth, you know of that. Then it goes down to Obed, and Obed was the father of Jesse. Jesse was whose father? David. So we've got David, and then David to Solomon. We've got Solomon to Jehoshaphat, and then skips around a little bit. It goes to Uzziah, it goes to Hezekiah. Then we've got the Babylonian captivity that happens. Then we've got Zerubbabel and Zadok and Eliyahu. And then we've got Mathan, and he comes down, and then Mary comes from him. Okay, so that's just in real brief there, and you can study that out a little more if you want to. But that's very briefly where Jesus came from with Mary. And so it's coming through that lineage, and it's talking about Judah there. And as you look at Judah, Jesus came both from Mary. Of course, God was his father, but also his adopted dad was Joseph, who also came from Judah. So they both came through that line in that, okay? As they divided these, And of course, these are coming from the 12 sons who became the 12 tribes. And as they went out into the wilderness, as they camped, they had a specific way of camping. And the tribes would be divided into their tribes, and they would all center around the tabernacle with the holy place, with the Holy of Holies, with the Ark of the Covenant. Judah in the wilderness camped on the east side, along with Issachar and Zebulun. And Judah faced the sunrise and faced the light. So that is significant. When we've got Judah here, this would be looking east into the sunlight. So we've got Zebulun, we've got Judah, we've got Issachar. And this is the way that they camped around the tabernacle. Okay? But the next slide I like a little bit better because it shows a little bit of a different way that they camped. Notice here that you've got the tabernacle in the middle. You've got the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night, because it was God's presence who was there in the tabernacle. And we are talking about 2 million people here camping. Notice that you've got the tabernacle here. This would be facing east. You've got Judah that is here. You've got Issachar. You've got Zebulun. But notice the shape that this is. It's a foretelling. It's the cross. And this is the way, basically, that they camped. And so I always thought that this one was cool because as it shows that, it's a foreshadowing and it's a foretelling of what happens. Now, as Jacob is blessing Judah, Judah means praise. It's important to note that as you go on in the scriptures, that as they get into the promised land and as they start to battle, what happens is that they always send Judah out first in the battle. They always send the worshipers out first. When they marched around Jericho and it was going to fall, they marched around, and what does the Bible say? Sends out all of the people with the trumpets and the musical instruments and all of that. That was Judah. And they were the ones who led the march around Jericho there. They led all of that area there. 2 generations later, under Solomon in 1 Kings, it talks again about Judah going first. And in Judges 20:18, it says, the Israelites went up to battle and inquired of the Lord, and they said, who of us is going to go up to battle first against the Benjamites? And the Lord replied, Judah is going to go first. And so he sends them out. Judges 1 also talks about that. 2 Chronicles 20, Jehoshaphat sends praise first into battle. And if you ever want to read a cool account, it's 2 Chronicles 20 of Jehoshaphat going into battle. And this is the place that God says to them, basically, set yourself, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord. You're not even going to have to go and fight because you're sending the praisers out first. You're sending Judah out first on that particular place. I'm going to talk more about this in just a minute. Now, I'll be done in just a little bit here. But what we've got is we've got the significance of Judah being here. Okay, Kurt, go on to the next slide, please. Okay. Jesus is called the Lion of Judah. We're going to talk more about that in just a moment. But the new kingdom comes in the New Testament, and Jesus comes on the scene. Isn't it interesting that you have the 12 sons of Jacob, and how many disciples did Jesus choose? 12. Okay? Again, foreshadowing. Significance there. And it says, let me see, go to my next slide here. Yes, Marge, is this 3? I think this is 3 slides, isn't it, Kurt? I believe it's 3 slides. Marge, go ahead and read the next 3 slides, please.
Now, if perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, for on this basis the people received the law, why was there still need for another priest to appear, one in the order of Melchizedek, and not in the order of Aaron? For when the priesthood is changed, the law must be changed as well. He of whom these things are said belonged to a different tribe from which no one has ever served at the altar. For it is clear that our Lord descended from Judah, a tribe as to which Moses said nothing about priests. And this point is even more clear if another priest like Melchizedek appears, one who has become a priest not by a law of succession, but the power of an indestructible life. For it is testified, you are a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek.
Okay. So, Jesus becomes the Lion of Judah, and he becomes the high priest after the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek, as we studied before, is the king of righteousness. And he was the king of Salem, coming in later to Jerusalem, of course. He's first mentioned in Genesis 14 when he offers bread and wine to Abram, and Abram's victory over the battle was because of Melchizedek. Okay? He is considered a type of Christ and foundational to the understanding Jesus' role as both king and priest. And so that's why it is that Jesus is after the order of Melchizedek rather than just simply after the order of Aaron, who was the high priest with the Levites. Okay? And Melchizedek is said to have never died, but he was made a priest by the sacrifice of his soul. So it's believed that Melchizedek possibly could have been Jesus incarnate at that point. And so some scholars kind of believe that that's how it is. Okay, so Jesus selects his 12 people, his 12 apostles, to represent the new Israel. So Jacob and his sons were the old Israel, the Old Testament. Jesus comes on the scene, and he represents the new Israel. Now, as you bring this together in the Old Testament and the New Testament, keep in mind, Lion of the tribe of Judah, praise, all of that. Go ahead and go on to the next. Marge, would you read these two? There should be 2 slides on this.
And when your days are fulfilled and you rest with your fathers, I will raise up your descendant after you, who will come from your own body, and I will establish his kingdom. He will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I will discipline him with the rods of men and with the blows of the sons of men. But my loving devotion will never be removed from him, as I removed it from Saul, whom I moved out of your way. Your house and kingdom will endure forever before me, and your throne will be established forever.
God is talking to David here. He's talking about the lineage of David. He is talking about the lion that is going to come from Judah because David came from Judah. He's talking about, yes, Solomon's going to fall. I'm going to discipline him, but I am never going to remove my presence from him. And I'm never going to remove my presence from the house of Judah. And so this is how it is that it's coming through and coming down through history and comes into the New Testament. Go ahead and go to the next. Now, this is kind of where our song comes in that we were singing earlier, and we're going to end with this song again, too. But this is Revelation 5, and Marge, I want you to read this. There should be about 5 or 6 slides here that go from verse number 1 down to verse 10. And I want you to keep in mind, as she's reading this and as she's going through this, that this is talking about the Lion of the tribe of Judah. It's talking about Jesus. It's talking about why it was that he came from Judah, what it was that he came to accomplish, and why praise is so important in all of our lives. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But Marge, go ahead and read, please.
Then I saw a scroll in the right hand of the one seated on the throne. It had writing on both sides and was sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look inside of it. And I began to weep bitterly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look inside of it. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed to open the scroll and its 7 seals." Then I saw a lamb who appeared to have been slain, standing in the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which represent the 7 spirits of God, sent out into all the earth. And he came and took the scroll from the right hand of the one seated on the throne. When he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song. "Worthy are you who takes the scroll and opens its seals, because you were slain, and by your blood you purchased for God those from every tribe and tongue and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign upon the earth."
God created the earth, and he gave the birthright to Adam. Adam relinquished his birthright to Satan, because Satan is called the god of this world, and Adam forfeited his inheritance from God and gave it to Satan. The interesting thing about this, there's a lot of symbolism in Revelation, but when you look back at it, the symbol of a forfeited inheritance is a sealed scroll. Now think about that for just a moment. The sign of a forfeited inheritance is a sealed scroll. And what happens here in the book of Revelation is John sees this sealed scroll. And he says, "Is there anybody that's worthy to open this scroll?" And he looks around at all the saints that have gone on before. Everyone is there, and no one is worthy to open that scroll. And he's in utter hopelessness. And he begins to weep. He begins to cry because there's nobody to buy back the forfeited inheritance. And one of the elders steps up and he says, "Don't worry, because the Lion of the tribe of Judah is worthy." And when John looks and he sees him, he doesn't see a lion, but he sees a lamb. And he sees that lamb that is slain for the foundations of the world. And that lamb steps forward and is able to break the seal and buy back the forfeited inheritance that Adam gave away to Satan. That's in yours and my life. That's how he bought us back. That forfeited inheritance that should have been utter chaos and utter destruction and utter hopelessness for you and me was bought back because of the blood of Jesus and because of what he did on the cross. And that's what Revelation 5 with those is talking about. And so it's important for you and I to realize the Lion of the tribe of Judah is talking about the worship and the praise that goes on. Because as you read there in Revelation, it talks about the angels and all of the elders and everyone bowing down and crying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. And anytime the Bible says something 3 times, it's very much something that we have to take note of. It was very important in the Jewish traditions and in Hebrew that if they said something 3 times, that it kind of made it law. It was something that was very, very important in that. And that is what all of this is about. And when we sang that song tonight, who is worthy to open that scroll? That's what it's talking about. And it's talking about the Lion of the tribe of Judah. That inheritance that came down through the lineage and was passed to Jesus. And he became that person that was able to buy us back because of that forfeited inheritance that mankind had given away. But now through Jesus it comes to you and me. And that's why it's so important for you and me to live that lifestyle of worship and lifestyle of praise, and to have that in our lives constantly, all the time, that we bathe ourselves in worship, we bathe ourselves in praise to the Lord because of that. Extremely important. Go ahead and stand.